Steve.
Hey, Gwen.
I'm so happy you decided to join me on this project because we've had a lot of opportunities to play this piece, but there was one pressing question I've never asked you, which is that if Beethoven was alive today, which team do you think he'd vote for in the World Series?
In the World Series?
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's see. Who would he vote for in the World Series? I think he'd probably go for scrappy Tampa Bay.
I think so too, yeah. He's a pretty scrappy guy.
He's a scrappy guy.
And in fact, talking about scrappy, this particular sonata of the five, I think, is the scrappiest one.
Yeah.
What was that quote that you talked about, this being one of the most violent pieces? I love that quote.
I think Bob Levin said it. I mean, he really had it right. He said, this is the most violent piece of chamber music that had yet been written. Right. Which I think is true. I mean, if you started counting sforzandi, we would have close to 100, must be. At least, I've never done it, but it'd probably be close to 100.
Right. And a sforzandi, just explain what a sforzandi is. For
people.
I
mean, it's in those days, I guess, a sforzando would be, it's a stress on a note. It's different than a fortepiano, because there are fortepianos in this too. So you start getting into this thing with Beethoven of trying to make a distinction between sforzandi, which are probably harsher, or a little bit harder, a little more violent accents, and fortepianos. And you have to talk about this stuff. When you're doing it together. So
it's painful to talk about it, but we have to talk about it.
We have to talk about it.
There's a whole range of articulation that doesn't really apply when you're playing a modern Steinway or a cello, which is with steel strings.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important to maybe talk a little bit about the range of articulations, and I can talk a lot about timing because playing an instrument like this, which is a reproduction instrument, which is gorgeous. This is made by the Wolfs in Washington. I've had to speed certain things up and then slow certain things down. So, what about for you on gut strings? How does that affect your playing?
Well, you have to play gut much more carefully. I was talking to a colleague the other day who was saying that he had the opportunity to try out one of the Strads in the Smithsonian, which was in gut strings, but he wasn't playing it. He was visiting a group that was playing it. And he said he tried the cello, and he said, I realized that I would have to learn how to play the cello all over again to play these, because so much of what we're doing on steel strings is about projection. And so there's a great deal of weight in your arm on the string. That kind of weight on the plain bald gut unwrapped is a squeak waiting to happen.
And it's called gut string because of?
Well, it was made, I think, from sheep gut. And most of the strings we have now are either nylon imitation of gut wrapped in metal, or metal, perlon. They're kind of these other things that are sort of facsimiles of gut. But this is how they made a lot of things, right? Back in the day with natural stuff. Right. And it's not cat gut. There was a lot of conversations about cat gut. It's not cat gut.
It's sheep gut.
I think it's sheep gut.
Oh, I feel sorry
for
the sheep.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
Now,
and the bow is still the hair of the horse, correct?
Bow's still hair of the horse. And this bow is actually, the bow I use is actually quite close to what Beethoven's time would have been. In other words, the shape of the bow is this. And before Beethoven's time, during Mozart's time, it went from being this to being this. And that also changed. It's kind of, it was as big a difference as going from this to a Steinway in terms of sustaining and kinds of articulation that you would make. This bow bounces better and it sustains more.
What kind of bow is it?
This is a Dodd bow.
Oh, Dodd is a great
so
maker, from English maker.
Yeah.
1700s.
I think it was probably made during Beethoven's lifetime.
Right.
So, yeah. So
1770 to 1827.
Yeah.
This piano is a reproduction piano, but it's an exact copy of a 1794.
Which is perfect for
Which is exactly what this period is.
Yeah.
And I think the amazing thing about this sonata is it's an Opus 5.
Yeah.
So it came right after his Opus 2s. He wrote 3 Opus 2s. Yeah. And then he also wrote these wonderful trios. So Beethoven was a late bloomer. He was not a prodigy like Mozart. And he didn't really start composing seriously until he was well into his late teens. And then when he went to study with Haydn.
Right. And he's a really smart guy.
He's a smart guy.
Because he was marketing himself, right? He said,
Correct.
He said, I'm going to go to Vienna. I'm going to make a splash. And my Opus 1 are going to be 3 piano trios, this newfangled thing, a piano trio, where I'm going to do something really outlandish. And he already written quite a bit of music in Bonn. He'd written enough music in Bonn that he could have trotted out there were 2 piano quartets, there were other things.
Right.
But he knew it was actually a business decision. And I think writing these cello sonatas was another business decision.
Oh yeah, you look at the people he dedicated it to.
Right.
So talk about the dedicatee for the
Yeah,
second one.
Is it?
Isn't it Prussia?
Yeah, the King of Prussia, right?
Right.
Because Lichnowsky, the Count Lichnowsky, who had taken Mozart on a big European tour in 1789, says to Beethoven, "We got to do the tour." I guess Lichnowsky now felt like he knew the tour. So he took Beethoven on exactly the same itinerary 7 years later, 1796.
Right.
And one of those stops was Berlin. And Berlin was the cello capital of Europe. Because the king played, and the principal cello was one of the great cellists in Europe. He had run from France because of the French Revolution.
Right.
Jean-Louis Duport.
Right.
And so he really knew on which side his bread was buttered.
Beethoven was a smarty in
Smart
terms
guy.
of finance. A lot of composers weren't smart in those days, and they got taken to the cleaners. But one of the things that Beethoven wasn't smart about was that he would write his manuscript out, at least for the sonatas. I don't know about the piano sonatas. And he would hand the actual manuscript over to the publisher, and then they would destroy the manuscript. And finally, someone said to him, like, "Dummy, don't do that. Keep your manuscript,
Right.
so at least you can check it against what's being published in the first editions."
Right.
What's the difference for you? Because I know you're not like a gut string player all the
No,
time. In
no.
fact, that's not your thing. I'm also not a forte pianist. So what did you learn? What did it reveal to you
Oh
to
my gosh.
play with these instruments
The level
and
of
with
reveal-
a clunky pianist
Oh.
like me? I mean,
Clunky pianist. Give me a break.
I would clunky pianist.
It justifies all these things we've seen in the scores all these years.
I know.
Why is that forte, Mr. Beethoven? You can't hear the cello at all. Why is the piano forte? It was not a matter of balance for Beethoven.
Yeah.
This instrument and the cello, the way he wrote the dynamics, make perfect sense.
Right.
When you play with a modern piano, and often in a hall where there may be 2,000 people, you have to do something that is sort of a simulacrum of a real performance of Beethoven. These early ones would have been in a salon in an aristocrat's house, right?
Like this.
Like this, exactly like this.
Right.
And I mean, if we put this in a hall for 2,000 people,
Oh, no.
what would that sound like?
They would be suffering and they'd be asking for their money back.
Right, they'd say, and especially, we now live in a loud world.
Very loud. In fact, I was going to talk about that because I think one of the things that I had to get used to was the intimacy of sound and the range. Where you're used to playing with this kind of range, you suddenly are down here and then you're really down here. The other thing for me that really I found very challenging is that this piano has 2 pedals and they're for my knees. They are not for my feet.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to pedal going up and down, and it was just so overwhelmingly weird.
I bet.
And then on this piano, the left pedal is a damper pedal for the whole keyboard, whereas
True
the right
words.
pedal
Yeah.
is only a damper pedal from the middle on up.
Oh, I didn't
So
know
you
that.
can play beautiful legato melodies, but you can have a clean Alberti bass. So for me, I'd have to live with this instrument for a couple of more months before I really feel natural at it.
Yeah.
But luckily for me, I'm a really good faker. I mean, if anything, I got from going to Yale is that you can fake your way through anything.
You're not
right?
faking at all.
I'm a good faker.
Do you think Beethoven would have preferred to write for the modern piano?
I think he would have loved it because, well, first of all, he was deaf, so I think he might even be able to hear just a little bit.
Okay.
But I think he had such a gigantic personality, and I think that he would have loved the thunder that this modern instrument. Having not been able to hear as of like from 1800, I don't think it would have made that much difference to him, the nuance.
Right.
But I would have loved to have heard what he would have created if he had a different instrument. But in Beethoven's own time, he had many different instruments.
Right.
And the Erard family gifted him stuff, and the Broadwood family gifted him pianos. And he, as you can tell from these pieces, he must have been a phenomenal pianist. Because you just don't write that kind of piano music for just someone who can't play. Like Ravel was a terrible pianist. We all knew that. But Beethoven made a lot of his fame as a pianist. And there were these famous duels over women with variations that he would have to compose. So, I consider it such a great privilege to work with you and Robert, my friends, because It's just fun for us at our age.
Yes.
I'm not going to say how old we are, but at our age, we get to learn and discover things that are marvelous about composers whom we've lived with already for the better part of most of our lives.
That's right. Completely new stuff.
It's wonderful. Yeah. And so I thank you. I think it's just
thank
been
you
a great privilege. And Eric Severson for his wonderful tuning.
Yes.
And David Bowles for his audio engineering. And of course, Tal and Derek for great video today. And I hope that this little talk will illuminate what you just heard. So thanks so much.
Thank you.